Dugdale.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I hope you don't mind, but I hope to just cover a couple of things I didn't manage to get into my opening before returning to address some of the points raised by other members. And I'd start by talking about redundant apprentices specifically. Back in 2009, the Scottish Government set up a scheme called Safeguard an Apprentice. It was designed to support businesses struggling to survive by giving them £75 a week to help them keep their apprentice on. That scheme was quietly scrapped by this government back at Christmas time. There's also an Adopt an Apprentice scheme. Of course.
Minister.
The scheme actually ceased last September. It's sad that Ms Dugdale's taken so long to catch up, but the scheme benefited in 2009-2010 291 young people. In 11-12, that fell to 15. The scheme was costing more than it was to actually help people. Yep. And will she retract once again her silly and willful, deliberate misunderstanding of the situation? Get to the facts.
Kezia Dugdale.
I'll apologise for getting the date December and September mixed up, but I won't apologise for the fundamental fact at the heart of this. The Minister says that it was due to lack of demand. Is she seriously telling us in these current economic circumstances businesses don't need help to keep their apprentices on? There is a second scheme, Presiding Officer, called Adopt an Apprentice, a scheme designed to replace redundant apprentices with new firms so that they can continue their qualifications. It is very popular with small businesses like Wishart Contracts in Edinburgh, in my own area, because they get a skilled apprentice without much of the associated cost. The Spice briefing on youth employment given to the Finance Committee this week says the future of Adopt an Apprentice is unclear. And at the Finance Committee this week, the Minister confirmed that she planned to continue to fund the scheme, but didn't say to what degree or by how much. So,
to the Finance Committee was that in March I made the announcement at a very public Holyrood conference in this city that once again we were extending the scheme. Please master the brief.
Kezia Dugdale.
Presiding Officer, again she's failed to answer the question. How much money is she going to spend on this scheme next year? I can tell her how much she spent over the last two. I'm surprised she can't tell us how much she wants to spend going forward. So I ask her for the detail. And I would say to her that the questions around the support she's giving for redundant apprentices brings back the heart of this matter, which is her government is more interested in delivering the 25,000 modern apprenticeships as a number rather than as a policy. Neil Findlay, in an intervention early on in the debate, made an important point about Skills Development Scotland and how they record the figures related to where apprentices are after they complete their qualifications. The Skills Development Agency records nothing about where these people are 3, 6, 12 months after they've completed their course in terms of whether they are still employed or not. And that is a very real worry. And it's my view that a number of these, probably quite a significant number of these, are ending up back on the dole queue, even though they've got their apprenticeship certificate. Now, the Minister suggested that that might be scaremongering or that it's untrue. But if she really thinks that, she should look at the local authority websites around Scotland advertising their own apprenticeship schemes, because she will see that time and time again, whenever a local authority advertises an apprenticeship, it's for a fixed term. And that fixed term is the length of the time it takes them to complete their apprenticeship. So no wonder that people are worried about whether these jobs exist at the end of the programme. There are other issues, Presiding Officer, that I wish we could cover at the beginning, and my colleague Jenny Mara has already asked some legitimate questions about the methodology around the £9 million given to the 6 local authorities, but I'd like to ask her about Community Jobs Scotland and why not a single job has been advertised on that website since March of this year. The Minister answered one of my parliamentary questions, saying that the scheme will return in August of this year. I'm sorry, I'd like to continue. And I say to her, if the scheme is so successful, why did she let it stop for 5 months when there are 100,000 young people out of work? In 2011-12, the Government funded this scheme to the tune of £10 million to create 2,000 opportunities. SCVO asked for this to be extended and offered to deliver 6,000 opportunities over 3 years for £21 million. They got £6 million to deliver 1,000 opportunities. I ask her what cost to society is it that for these people to remain unemployed when there is a perfectly good scheme that she continues to remind us of not getting the money it needs to deliver. And I remain concerned about activity agreements and whether that should be considered a positive destination in the eyes of young people. Mark MacDonald made, I thought, an excellent speech, and one thing he touched on was the transitions between different employment programmes. And I am too worried about how many young people are just recycled around the system, a story that we can't see simply from the employment statistics. And I also share Liam MacArthur's concerns about SDS offices and the fact that many are closing or reducing their hours, and young people are increasingly being referred to online sources. That is not my experience of how young people want to access careers advice. They want to be able to turn up and ask the questions. It shouldn't just be an appointment-based system. Ian Gray made an important point. He said we should spend less time counting apprenticeships and more time making them count. And he also killed the myth that because we voted against the budget, we voted against modern apprenticeships.
Order.
He reminded me of Mark MacDonald's speech to the UK budget debate, when Mark argued that just because you vote against the budget doesn't mean you're against everything in it. And I say to Mark MacDonald, join us. There's a seat. You've seen the light.
Order. We will hear the member.
Presiding Officer, Kevin Stewart stood up and simply got his facts wrong. He said that £35 million was spent in 2006. I have the Scottish Government press release in my hand. I'll give it to him afterwards. On the back, it says £68 million in 2006 on the Scottish Government website. So if his minister is going to accuse me of not doing my homework, I would ask him to do his before he comes back to the Chamber and talks about this issue. In closing, Presiding Officer, absolutely. The Minister started her job and there were 100,000 young Scots out of work. She's been in it for 6 months and there are still 100,000 young Scots without work. We want to work together with you on this issue, but you have to be straight with us and you have to be straight with the public, desperate for young opportunities for our people.